Welcome. Well, you're at home with Jim and Joy, and you are an important part of our EWTN family. And we certainly would love to hear from you, so please send us an email with a question or a comment to jimandjoy@ewtn.com. And thank you so much for welcoming us into your home. We know what a privilege it is to be there. Today, we bring to you the Honorable William Pryor, Jr. Now, he is the Chief Judge of the U.S. Court of Appeals, the 11th Circuit, here in Alabama, and we are blessed and honored to have Judge William Pryor with us.
And the chief, because he's the chief judge there, well, we just have a love for him.
Yes.
Because he's a local guy. And I think he grew up in the Mobile area and then migrated up to the Birmingham area, serving in the Hugo Black Courthouse, because I guess he has an office there with the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. He's a Catholic guy, and I'm not sure where his home is now in terms of the parish, but it may be Our Lady of Sorrows, it may be the cathedral, because we always see him and his precious wife at the cathedral. He served as Attorney General in the state of Alabama, got to know him there a little bit. And just a man of integrity. I mean, you just know it. You just look at him, you see it. And he's a devotee of Father James E. Coyle, who we've been sharing quite a bit about. August 11th was the 100th anniversary of the assassination, the martyrdom of Father Coyle. And Judge has been, you know, as we started the Father Coyle Memorial Project, he was there like right away. I don't know what the deal was, you know, that he was involved. He's going to share a little bit about that and why, you know, Father Coyle is important in his life. And so he's going to be sharing with us, and it's just a great privilege to have him. And he's done a lot of work in the area of the trial of Edwin Stevenson, this minister who assassinated Father Coyle, and a lot about the trial. What happened before the trial? Was the trial rigged? Who was the judge in the trial? Klan influenced? Hugo Black, a renowned Supreme Court justice, was a senator before then, was the defense attorney for Stevenson, and this whole trial was like amazing, and Stevenson got off under temporary insanity. The chief will correct me on anything I'm saying that isn't right. But it's an amazing story, so it's great to have Chief with us today, because he's just a great man, great Catholic man, and he really integrates, for me, morality, faith, and law.
Yes.
And so it's a privilege. You're going to really be blessed by this show today. There's plenty more to come. We'll be right back. Please don't go away.
Welcome back. We're at home with Jim and Joy, and today it is our privilege and honor to have with us as our guest Judge William Pryor, and he is of the U.S. Court of Appeals at the 11th Circuit, and we are so excited to have you, Judge. And we have known you for years, and it has been a privilege to know you and your wife and your children. But tell our family a little bit about yourself, your family of origin. You come from good Catholic stock, so tell our family all about your family.
Yeah, well, so I grew up in Mobile. Both my parents actually were converts.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, were taught in Catholic schools. My mom taught kindergarten and first grade, and my father was the band director at our Catholic high school, McGill-Tulane in Mobile. And later he became a permanent deacon in the Catholic Church. So I'm a cradle Catholic, but my parents had the zeal of converts.
Yeah.
I'm a convert. I think sometimes they make the best Catholics. Just saying.
The more years you go back, especially in Alabama, I would think the harder it is to be a convert. So that would be an amazing story in and of itself.
Probably a little easier in Mobile, where there are a lot more Catholics as a percentage in Mobile than there are in other parts of the state.
Yeah. So you grew up in a strong family of faith. Your dad was a musician, and then when you went off to school, were you going in to learn music and so on
Yeah,
to get a degree?
so I first went off to college where both my parents had graduated, and started as a music major. You know, when I was raised son of a band director,
Right.
everyone would say, "Oh, well, you should follow in your father's footsteps," and that was something that I was interested in because I did well in music, but I always had this nagging feeling that maybe I should pursue a different path. I really loved history and writing and English, and thought eventually that maybe I should go to law school. So after my freshman year of college, I switched majors to a pre-law curriculum and decided to go to law school.
Yeah.
Did your faith have any influence in that? Or you were just thinking, I'm going to be a lawyer and not a band director like my dad? What were you thinking?
Oh, well, I mean, throughout it, you want to do what you think God has called you to do. You want to find your vocation. You know, one of the things I thought about doing in high school was potentially becoming a Brother of the Sacred Heart. The high school that I had attended had a number of brothers who taught there, and I went on retreats with them and seriously thought about that. As did one of my other brothers. He actually lived with the brothers for a while in New Orleans. But I really felt that with the talents and strengths that, and just the interest and passions that God had given me, that law was the right vocation for me.
So McGill Catholic Institution, and we're going to be speaking about Father Coyle here in a few minutes, but of course that's where Father Coyle was rector and was director of what was going on there when he came before 1904, because he came to Birmingham 1904, before then when he came over from Ireland. So you have been around priests and sisters and brothers, you know, a good part of your life, and you feel like you got a sound Catholic education, and so that really develops a comprehensive way of thinking about things and looking about things. And so, I can't see how you weren't influenced by that. And I guess when I think of you, I think of the law, being a jurist that you are, excellent jurist, but you always seem to speak about morality and about faith. And I really don't hear many people doing morality, faith, law. Like, that's like a no-no in a lot of circles, I think. So when was that instilled in you? Did it develop over time? I guess maybe both, because you do.
I think baptism.
Great.
So, with the upbringing that I had, faith was, you know, the foundation really of the worldview that I developed and learned from my parents. And I don't think we can separate morality from anything that we do, and that includes law. I've always been one who felt that my religious faith informs me as a judge in the performance of my duty. It's what allows me to take, or really informs me about how seriously to take my oath of office, about my diligence in the performance of my work, the honesty with which I have to perform my work, but above all, really the fundamental thing is that understanding of the oath. You know, the oath, the Catechism teaches us is a profound kind of promise. You're taking God as witness to what you affirm, and so to take a false oath is to violate the second commandment. So judges have to take that oath of office seriously, and I think a religious faith properly informs your understanding of your oath.
Was there any saint that particularly influenced you?
Yeah, so my patron saint is St. Thomas More, has been for quite a while, and I do look at him as a role model, someone, you know, sometimes the quote that is attributed to him is that he was the king's good servant, but God's first.
Right.
The accurate quote is probably that he was the king's good servant and God's first, that he did not see a conflict between the two. But when called by Henry VIII to choose. He understood where the king's authority ended and what God's authority required him to do as well.
And cost what it might, right?
It cost him his life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how that works its way out. You know, with the Constitution, you seem to be conservative regarding the Constitution, how you look at that. And then you've got this morality, which is not just kind of a generic morality, but you get morality that's Catholic based. So how do you sort that out at times when, I don't know.
For me, the happy experience of being an American judge is that fidelity to the Constitution, the text of the Constitution as it was understood when it was adopted by the American people, should not really cause a conflict between morality and law. I think we have a just Constitution. Of course, there have been imperfections in it that have been changed over time. That's why we have amendments to the Constitution. Why we had a Civil War. But when I do my duty to interpret the Constitution or to interpret federal laws, I don't really see a conflict between faith and morality. I can happily do my duty of obeying the law and applying the law in a way that does not cause any conflict with my conscience.
Wonderful. Wish they were more like you. So let's, I'm thinking about your statement about St. Thomas More, and that helps me to understand, your interest in Father Coyle and your great interest in the case of Father Coyle. So let's just go with why your interest in Father James E. Coyle. When did that begin? Why are you so interested in him? What do you think he brings to the church and to all people?
Yeah, well, the story of Father Coyle and his murder has long fascinated me for a lot of reasons. Of course, he grew up in Ireland. He was Irish, and after studying at the seminary and being ordained in Rome, came to Mobile, my hometown, where he taught at McGill, my high school alma mater, my father's high school alma mater, where he taught. And he was the rector at McGill, which my father, as a permanent deacon, later was rector.
Wow.
That's first connection. We moved to Birmingham, settled here, and were parishioners at where we are now, which is St. Paul's Cathedral, which is Father Coyle's church eventually, starting in 1904. And our older daughter was baptized there, so I was immediately fascinated by the story of Father Coyle. And then you overlay that with the fact that as a federal judge, I go to work every day in the Hugo Black Federal Courthouse in Birmingham. And Hugo Black, a justice of the Supreme Court, was years before that the defense lawyer for Edwin Stevenson, the man who murdered Father Coyle. And so really it's the confluence of all those things. At one time our family worshipped at Our Lady of Sorrows, which is the church where Ruth Stevenson, later Ruth Guzman, became a Catholic. So every angle that I looked at the story of Father Coyle, his murder, the trial that followed it, I found a connection with my own life.
Yeah.
There was an amazing tapestry, isn't it?
It really is.
I'm just wondering, when you attended, maybe when your father was there as well, was there any sharing about Father Coyle? Was he remembered or not?
I don't think I ever hearing anything, or I recall ever hearing anything about Father Coyle when I was in high school or when I was growing up. I didn't learn about him until I came to Birmingham. But the interesting thing, though, is that I know that's not true anymore. I know that there has been, a lot of education for the students there.
That's right.
About Father Coyle. In fact, the celebrated, the really authoritative book about his murder and the trial that followed that Professor Sharon Davies wrote.
Rising Road.
Yeah, Rising Road. Sharon, I know, spoke at McGill, around the time that she wrote the book.
Yeah. And they commissioned a beautiful oil painting of Father Coyle that's just beautifully, beautifully done. Your experience is kind of similar to my own, in coming to Birmingham in 1980 and serving as an Episcopal priest at that time. I was a lapsed Catholic, became an Episcopal priest, serving here, and heard the story of Father Coyle from a Protestant.
Really?
And talked about Father Coyle and that there was this Methodist minister that had assassinated him, that he really felt it was unfinished business in terms of that being recognized and seen, and of repentance and asking for healing. And it was really an amazing thing. And wound up at Father Coyle's grave one day, praying there and saying, Father Coyle, I'm Jim Pinto. I used to be a Catholic. I got a great ministry in the Episcopal Church. Should I come back? Should I come back to the Catholic faith? And I had a relic from St. Peter's tomb that somebody had given me, and I pressed it down to his grave. And I said, should I come back? And then I looked down, and there were like 30 or 40 priests buried there, 3 bishops, and a whole host of sisters. I went to maybe it was 50, 60 graves. I'm Jim Pinto. I was a lapsed Catholic. I'm a lapsed Catholic. I'm an Episcopal priest. I think I'm having a great, should I come out? Amazing things happened in my life. So then after that happened, I went to the cathedral, spoke to the pastor at that time, Donahoe, and I said, I just had an amazing experience at the grave of Father Coyle, and it led me back in, but I don't hear anything about Father Coyle. I think it was just so grievous and so painful that people didn't.
Yeah.
And unearthing that was like, why are you unearthing, Father Coyle? I said, but I sure know a lot about Hugo Black. I know there's a Hugo Black building.
Right.
And how come everybody knows the Hugo Black building? Everybody
Yeah.
knows the name Hugo Black. I said, but nobody knows where Father Coyle is buried. Like, what's going on? And Father Donahoe was like, yeah, I know. And I really, and that's where we began to kind of spread the word and started a website on Father Coyle. Sharon Davies hit it. I think they gave her at Ohio State. Gave her like 2 or 3 years off, and just funded the whole thing. And the more we share about Father Coyle, the more interest within the people. So you mentioned Hugo Black, of course, and let's we just have a few minutes here, and of course we'll have tomorrow. But why is the trial itself? You're a jurist, so it would be interesting, but not many people have focused on it. I get your background. So what is it about that? What are the dimensions within it? What are the lessons to be learned? You gave a presentation at Notre Dame years back entitled The Murder of Father James Coyle, the Prosecution of Edwin Stevenson, and the True Calling of Lawyers. And that says a lot about the dimensions you're looking at, and then you kind of updated this recently. Yeah.
So that trial where Father Coyle's murderer, Edwin Stevenson, was acquitted was an unjust trial. It was riddled with appeals to racial and religious bigotry. Hugo Black's trial tactics as the lead defense lawyer were in many respects dishonorable tactics. And I think there are a lot of lessons for lawyers from that trial that I've tried to share with other lawyers and judges. That's what has fascinated me. I've done that not to condemn Hugo Black. Right. Hugo Black is like all of us, was an imperfect man, and went on to have really a storied and important career as a Justice of the Supreme Court. He signed Brown versus Board of Education, ending racial segregation in public schools.
Right. Amazing.
He signed Loving versus Virginia, right. Which ended bans of interracial marriage, which is ironic given the Stevenson trial and his tactics there. So, when you look at his life and his career, that you have to evaluate that fairly. There's good and bad there.
Right. But you're a lawyer now, a chief judge, and so on, and your milieu that you dwell in is attorneys and lawyers and people like this, and there's just lessons to be learned from this case.
That's right. That,
as you say, you don't win at any price, right? I mean,
right.
So share about that, because there may be some guys that say, I didn't know that. It's like, I thought you do win it. And it seems like Hugo Black and the team there and the judge, they were winning at any price. And that seemed to be laid out even before the trial.
Yeah, so the end does not justify the means. We know that from the Catechism. There are some tactics that are morally wrong, and it matters not. The sole criterion for a lawyer's work is not whether a particular tactic will benefit a client and eventually win a case. There are moral responsibilities that we all bear.
Chief, we're going to take a break at this point. We're going to hold you over for the last segment, speaking with Chief Judge William Pryor of the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, and sharing about Father James E. Coyle and the trial of Edwin Stevenson. So we'll be right back. Plenty more to come. Don't go away.
Welcome back. We're at Home with Jim and Joy, and we're having a wonderful conversation with Chief Justice Judge Pryor, talking about Father Coyle. For those of you, if you're watching EWTN, you are learning. You learned about it last week when we celebrated the beautiful Mass, and we're going to continue just to unveil and that you would understand and realize the beautiful life, sacrifice, and the injustice that happened here in Birmingham, Alabama.
More information at fathercoyle.org. That's fathercoyle.org. So we just got a couple of minutes here, and we're just kind of opening up the trial of Edwin Stevenson, the man who murdered Father Coyle, and speaking about kind of the conduct of attorneys and the mentioning of Hugo Black and his future career, some wonderful decisions that he was a part of, but the way he conducted himself in this, you really call into question. So what is it that you're calling into question? What was going on? What was happening either before it or during it that you find despicable to some degree?
So Edwin Stevenson's first defense was that Father Coyle had apparently struck him and that was reaching for a weapon, which was to say the least, implausible, really a ridiculous charge. So although he had pleaded not guilty by reason of self-defense originally, what he later changed the plea to once Hugo Black became his lead defense lawyer was not guilty by reason of temporary insanity. He actually added that plea, which was totally inconsistent with a plea of self-defense. And the reason for that was that it allowed the introduction of a lot of testimony about what would make this Methodist minister go temporarily crazy and kill a Catholic priest. And that brought in appeals to racial and religious bigotry, an emphasis on the fact that the witnesses for the prosecution were Catholic. They were the ones who found Father Coyle, for example, his sister, or the attending physician at St. Vincent's Hospital, other witnesses to the crime. And this not guilty by reason of temporary insanity defense also allowed Hugo Black to ridicule the race of Pedro Guzman, who had married earlier that day with Father Coyle officiating, Reverend Stevenson's daughter, Ruth, and they mocked his race. He was Puerto Rican of Spanish descent, and made it out to be, to be a lesser human being, an inferior person. There are a lot of appeals to xenophobia, nativism, and religious bigotry.
Well, thank you for opening this up to us. We're going to continue the conversation tomorrow, and maybe some more details on that. I mean, you're soft-spoken and very detailed and well. I'm recalling some of the things that were said and done. You're saying them nicer than I would say them. So some of the details about how that took place, how he even change the lighting in the room when Pedro Guzman came in, and things that were said about the Catholics that were testifying. I mean, it's hard to believe in our time,
Yeah.
but it was really happening then. So thank you so much. So thank you. Thank you so much for being with us this day. And may we take away from Father Coyle his courage, his zeal for the Lord, and his determination that he was a man who knew what he believed, he lived what he believed, and he imitated his Lord unto death, willfully and intentionally. What an example. What a priest for that time. What a priest for this time. So keep it on EWTN. You're an important part of this EWTN family. You're never alone. You're always at home with Jim and with Joy. Bye now.